At 4:30 on November 1st, 1942, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone pressed his body against the sandbag wall of Henderson Field, watching Japanese infantry mass in the jungle 300 yards away. 26 years old, 4 weeks on Guadalcanal. 0 confirmed kills with the machine gun he had just inherited from a dead gunner. The Japanese had committed 20,000 troops to retaking the airfield. Intelligence reported at least 2,000 soldiers assembling for the assault on his sector. Basilone commanded 2 Browning M1917 water-cooled machine guns defending a narrow gap in the American perimeter. 2 guns, 6 Marines, 200 yards of frontage. The mathematics were simple. If the Japanese broke through, they would reach Henderson Field in 10 minutes. If they reached Henderson Field, the battle for Guadalcanal was over. If you want to see how Basilone's impossible defense turned out, please hit that like button. Every like helps this story reach more viewers. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Basilone. Guadalcanal was 6 months into what would become a 19-month campaign. The Japanese had built an airfield on the island. The Americans had captured it on August 7th. Neither side could afford to lose it. The airfield controlled the southern Solomon Islands. Control of the Solomons meant control of the sea lanes to Australia. Control of the sea lanes meant the difference between victory and defeat in the Pacific. By late October 1942, both sides were exhausted. The Marines had been fighting for 3 months on reduced rations. Malaria affected 75% of the men. Dysentery was endemic. Resupply ships arrived irregularly. Ammunition was rationed. Food was worse. Marines were eating captured Japanese rice mixed with whatever they could scavenge from the jungle. The Japanese situation was equally desperate. Their supply convoys faced constant air attack. Reinforcements arrived with minimal equipment. Soldiers were ordered to capture American supplies because Japanese logistics could not sustain them. The difference was numbers. The Japanese had 20,000 fresh troops from the 38th Division. The Marines had 10,000 men, most sick, all exhausted. Lieutenant General Masao Maruyama commanded the Japanese assault force. His plan was straightforward: attack Henderson Field from multiple directions simultaneously. Overwhelm the Marine defenses through sheer weight of numbers. Recapture the airfield. Destroy American air power in the Solomons. The plan required precise coordination. Different Japanese units would attack at exactly the same time. The Marines would have to divide their forces. Divided forces could be defeated. Basilone's sector was the southern approach to Henderson Field, a narrow corridor between the Lunga River and a dense jungle ridge. The terrain channeled attacking forces into a 200-yard frontage. Perfect defensive ground. Except the Marines did not have enough men to properly defend it. The regimental commander had assigned 1 understrength platoon to hold the position. 28 Marines, 4 machine gun crews, 2 mortars. Against 2,000 Japanese soldiers, the position would last approximately 10 minutes. John Basilone had joined the Marine Corps in 1934. 8 years of peacetime service. Expert marksman, machine gun specialist. He had served in the Philippines before the war. Had spent 2 years in Manila maintaining coastal defense guns. The other Marines called him Manila John. The nickname stuck. When war started, Basilone requested combat assignment. He arrived on Guadalcanal in September 1942 as a gunnery sergeant in charge of a machine gun section. 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, D Company. The Browning M1917 machine gun was the Marine Corps' primary crew-served weapon. The gun weighed 103 pounds with its water-filled cooling jacket and tripod. It fired 30.06 Springfield rounds at a rate of 450 rounds per minute. Maximum effective range was 1,500 yards. The weapon was accurate, reliable, and deadly. It was also heavy, immobile, and required constant maintenance. Each gun needed a crew of 6 men: gunner, assistant gunner, 4 ammunition carriers. Basilone commanded 2 guns, 12 Marines total. On October 31st, the Japanese began their preliminary bombardment. Artillery shells crashed into the Marine perimeter throughout the day. The shelling killed 3 men in Basilone's section, wounded 5 more. By nightfall on October 31st, Basilone had 9 effective Marines remaining. One of his guns had lost its entire crew. Basilone took over as gunner. He reorganized the survivors into 1 effective crew and positioned them to cover the most likely Japanese approach route. The Japanese attacked at 4:30 on November 1st. No preliminary bombardment, no warning. Just waves of infantry emerging from the jungle, screaming and firing. The first wave consisted of approximately 200 soldiers. They advanced in a tight mass directly toward Basilone's position. Standard Japanese assault tactics: overwhelming force, accept casualties, break through the defensive line. Basilone opened fire at 300 yards. The M1917 cycled smoothly. Tracer rounds arced into the mass of Japanese infantry. Soldiers fell. The rest kept coming. At 200 yards, the Japanese return fire intensified. Rifle rounds cracked overhead. Machine gun fire kicked up dirt around Basilone's position. He ignored it. The M1917's water-cooled barrel allowed sustained fire without overheating. Basilone held the trigger down and swept the gun across the attacking formation. The first wave stalled at 150 yards. Bodies piled up in the kill zone. The survivors retreated into the jungle. Basilone's ammunition carriers brought up fresh belts, 250 rounds per belt. The gun had fired approximately 400 rounds. The barrel was hot but functional. The water in the cooling jacket was beginning to boil. Steam rose from the jacket in the humid jungle air. Basilone poured more water from a canteen. The gun was ready for the next assault. The second wave hit at 5 o'clock. Larger than the first, approximately 300 soldiers. The Japanese had learned from the first assault. This time they attacked from 2 directions. The main force approached directly. A smaller force of 50 men tried to flank from the left. Basilone saw the flanking force and made a decision. He left his assistant gunner on the main gun, grabbed the second M1917, carried it 40 yards to the left flank position. The gun weighed 103 pounds. Basilone moved it alone. He set the gun up without a tripod, braced it against a fallen log. The flanking force was 100 yards away and closing. Basilone opened fire from the hip. The recoil was brutal without the tripod's stabilization. The gun bucked in his hands. He held it steady and walked the fire into the Japanese formation. Soldiers fell in clusters. The flanking attack collapsed. The survivors retreated. But the main assault was still coming. Basilone abandoned the second gun, ran back to his primary position. His assistant gunner was firing controlled bursts. The gun was working, but ammunition was running low. Each gun position had started with 2,000 rounds. They had fired more than half. The ammunition carriers were bringing up the last belts. After those were gone, the position would fall. The Japanese reached 50 yards, close enough to throw grenades. The first grenade landed 10 feet from Basilone's position. He grabbed it and threw it back. It exploded in the air above the Japanese soldiers. Shrapnel cut down 3 men. More grenades came. Basilone threw 2 more back. The third grenade landed too close. He had no time. He pressed his body into the sandbags and covered his head. The explosion blew dirt over his position. His ears rang. Blood ran from his nose. He was alive. The gun had stopped firing. His assistant gunner was wounded. Shrapnel in the shoulder. Still conscious but unable to operate the weapon. Basilone took over. The Japanese were 30 yards away and charging. He pressed the trigger. The gun fired 3 rounds and jammed. A belt link had bent in the feed mechanism. The gun was dead. Basilone had seconds before the Japanese overran his position. He grabbed his M1911 pistol, 7 rounds in the magazine. The Japanese soldiers were 20 yards away. Basilone fired. A soldier fell. He fired again. Another soldier fell. The Japanese were 10 yards away. Basilone emptied the magazine. 3 more soldiers fell. The slide locked back, empty. A Japanese soldier lunged with a bayonet. Basilone sidestepped and swung the empty pistol. The gun hit the soldier's face. The man fell. Another soldier came from the right. Basilone picked up a K-bar knife from a dead Marine. The blade was 7 inches long. He stabbed the second soldier in the chest. The man died. A third soldier appeared. Basilone used the knife again. Then the Japanese assault broke. The survivors retreated into the jungle. Basilone stood in his position, surrounded by bodies. His pistol was empty. His knife was bloody. His machine gun was jammed. His crew was down to 4 effective men. Dawn was breaking. He could see the jungle clearly now. He could see the Japanese regrouping. They were preparing another assault. Basilone cleared the jammed belt from his gun. The bent link had caused a double feed. He removed both rounds, inspected the feed mechanism. Everything else looked functional. He loaded a fresh belt, tested the action. The gun cycled smoothly. The weapon was ready, but ammunition was critical. Each gun position was down to fewer than 500 rounds. Basilone needed resupply. Without ammunition, the next assault would succeed. The problem was distance. The battalion ammunition dump was 600 yards behind the front line. Getting there required crossing open ground under sporadic Japanese fire. Coming back required carrying 100 pounds of ammunition across the same ground. Basilone made the decision. He would go himself. His remaining crew could hold the position for 10 minutes, maybe 15. He had to make the round trip in less time. Basilone ran. He covered the 600 yards to the ammunition dump in less than 4 minutes. The supply sergeant was overwhelmed. Ammunition requests were coming from every sector. Japanese attacks had hit the entire perimeter. Every position needed resupply. The sergeant told Basilone he would have to wait. Basilone did not wait. He grabbed 2 ammunition cans. Each can held 250 rounds of linked .30-06 ammunition. Each can weighed 50 pounds. He carried 1 can in each hand and started running back. Japanese snipers had infiltrated the area between the ammunition dump and the front line. They fired at Basilone as he ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. He did not stop. He did not drop the ammunition. He reached his position in 5 minutes. His crew was still holding. The Japanese had not attacked. Basilone dropped the ammunition cans and collapsed against the sandbags. He was gasping for air. His hands were bleeding from carrying the metal cans. He had run 1,200 yards in 9 minutes while carrying 100 pounds. He was 26 years old and in the best physical condition of his life, but even he had limits. The third Japanese assault came at 6:30. This one was different. The Japanese had brought up mortars. The first rounds impacted 100 yards behind Basilone's position. The Japanese were bracketing the Marine line, walking the mortar fire forward. Basilone watched the explosions creeping toward him. He could not move. His position was the anchor of the defensive line. If he abandoned it, the Japanese would pour through the gap. The mortar rounds hit his position. The first round landed 20 feet away. The explosion killed one of his ammunition carriers. The second round hit directly in his fighting hole. The round was a dud. It penetrated the sandbags and buried itself in the dirt without exploding. Basilone stared at the unexploded round, a live 50mm mortar shell 18 inches from his face. If it detonated, the entire crew would die. Basilone carefully moved away from the round. He repositioned his gun 5 yards to the right. The crew followed. They left the unexploded shell where it lay. The Japanese infantry attacked while the mortars were still falling. Approximately 400 soldiers this time. They charged across the bodies from the previous assaults. They used the corpses as cover. They fired from 100 yards, 75 yards, 50 yards. Basilone fired back. The M1917 was running smoothly now. He had found a rhythm. Short bursts, shift aim, fire again, conserve ammunition. Every round had to count. His assistant gunner was feeding belts as fast as Basilone could fire them. The gun's barrel was glowing red. The water in the cooling jacket was boiling violently. Steam obscured Basilone's vision. He poured more water into the jacket. The water hit the superheated metal and turned to steam instantly. He kept firing. The Japanese were 40 yards away, 30 yards, 20 yards. Too close for the machine gun's beaten zone to be effective. Basilone was firing almost straight at individual soldiers. Then something impossible happened. The Japanese assault stalled. The soldiers stopped advancing. They took cover. They began retreating. Basilone did not understand why. Then he heard it, machine gun fire from his right flank. A Marine squad had counterattacked. They had moved through the jungle and hit the Japanese assault from the side. The crossfire was devastating. Japanese soldiers caught between 2 firing lines were cut down in seconds. The assault collapsed. The survivors fled into the jungle. Basilone checked his ammunition. Fewer than 200 rounds remaining. His gun crew was down to 3 men. His position looked like a slaughterhouse. Bodies were piled 3 deep in front of his sandbags. Blood soaked the ground. The smell was terrible. Cordite, blood, and human waste. The combination was overwhelming. Basilone's hands were shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion. He had been fighting for more than 2 hours. The adrenaline was wearing off, but the Japanese were not finished. A 4th assault came at 7:45, smaller than the previous attacks, approximately 150 soldiers. But these soldiers were different. They moved with discipline. They used cover effectively. They coordinated their fire. These were veteran troops, not conscripts. The earlier assaults had been probing attacks designed to identify American positions and exhaust defenders. This assault was the main effort. The Japanese advanced in small groups. One group would fire while another moved. Standard infantry tactics, effective tactics. The groups were hard to target. Basilone fired at movement. He hit some soldiers. Others reached cover. The Japanese were 100 yards away, then 75 yards, then 50 yards. They were going to reach his position. Basilone understood the geometry. His machine gun could not stop this assault alone. He made a decision that should have gotten him killed. He stood up. He grabbed his machine gun by the barrel. The barrel was still hot enough to burn flesh. Basilone ignored the pain. He lifted the 103-pound weapon off its tripod. He carried it forward 20 yards. He set it down on the forward edge of his position. He was now completely exposed. No sandbags, no cover. Just Basilone and his machine gun between the Japanese and Henderson field. He opened fire. The gun was firing from the hip again. The recoil drove him backward. He braced his feet and leaned into the weapon. The Japanese were 40 yards away, too close to miss. Basilone swept the gun left to right. Soldiers fell in groups. The assault wavered. Then it broke. The Japanese retreated. Again. Basilone collapsed. His hands were burned. The skin on his palms had blistered from the hot barrel. He could smell his own flesh cooking. But he was alive. His position was holding, and dawn had fully broken. In daylight, the Japanese could not mass for another assault without being spotted by Marine artillery observers. The worst was over. Basilone's position held through the rest of the battle. The Japanese made 2 more attempts to break through his sector. Both failed. By noon on November 1st, the Japanese assault on Henderson Field had collapsed. Lieutenant General Maruyama withdrew his remaining forces into the jungle. The attack had cost him more than 3,000 casualties. The Marines had held. Casualty counts from Basilone's sector were staggering. Marines counted 38 Japanese bodies directly in front of his machine gun position. Another 60 bodies were scattered across the approach route. Intelligence estimated Basilone's guns had killed or wounded more than 200 Japanese soldiers during the battle. His position had held against at least 5 assaults. His sector had not been penetrated. The regimental commander visited Basilone's position that afternoon. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the empty ammunition cans. He looked at Basilone's burned hands. He did not say anything. He just nodded and walked away. 3 days later, the Medal of Honor recommendation was submitted. John Basilone was evacuated from Guadalcanal in December 1942. His hands required medical treatment. The burns had become infected. Navy doctors treated the infections and sent Basilone back to the United States for recovery. He arrived in San Diego in January 1943. By then, his Medal of Honor had been approved. On May 21, 1943, Major General Alexander Vandegrift presented the Medal of Honor to Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone at a ceremony in Australia. Vandegrift had commanded the Marines on Guadalcanal. He had witnessed the battle for Henderson Field. He knew what Basilone had done. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry in action against enemy Japanese forces, above and beyond the call of duty." The citation detailed the machine gun defense, the ammunition resupply run, the burned hands, the 200 Japanese casualties. Basilone returned to the United States as a hero. The Marine Corps sent him on a war bond tour. He visited 30 cities in 3 months. He gave speeches. He shook hands. He sold war bonds. He hated every minute of it. Basilone was a machine gunner, not a public speaker, not a symbol. He requested return to combat duty. The Marine Corps refused. Basilone was too valuable as a recruiting tool. In 1944, Basilone threatened to resign his commission if he was not allowed back into combat. The Marine Corps relented. He was assigned to the 5th Marine Division. He trained with the division at Camp Pendleton. In July 1944, Basilone married Lena May Riggy, a Marine sergeant working as a field cook. They had known each other for 6 months. They would be married for 7 months. The 5th Marine Division deployed to Iwo Jima in February 1945. Basilone landed with the first wave on February 19th. D-Day. His unit's objective was the southern end of the island, specifically Airfield No. 1. The Japanese had fortified the approaches with bunkers, pillboxes, and minefields. The invasion plan estimated 3 days to secure the southern sector. The estimate was optimistic. Basilone's platoon was pinned down on the beach within minutes of landing. Japanese artillery and mortar fire was intense. The black volcanic sand prevented Marines from digging proper foxholes. The sand would collapse as fast as they could dig. Men died in the open because they had no cover. Basilone's platoon was stuck 100 yards from the beach. They could not advance. They could not retreat. Artillery rounds were falling every 30 seconds. Basilone identified the problem. A Japanese blockhouse was directing artillery fire onto the beach. The blockhouse had to be destroyed, or the entire landing force would be massacred. Basilone organized a demolition team. 4 Marines with satchel charges. Basilone would lead them to the blockhouse. The route required crossing 200 yards of open ground under direct fire. They moved out at 9 o'clock. Basilone led. The demolition team followed. Japanese machine guns opened fire immediately. The first Marine was hit in the legs. He fell. Basilone dragged him to cover. The team kept moving. They reached a destroyed tank. The tank provided temporary cover. Basilone planned the final assault on the blockhouse from behind that tank. At 9:30, Basilone and his team charged the blockhouse. They covered the final 50 yards at a dead sprint. Japanese machine gun fire cut down 2 Marines. Basilone and 1 other Marine reached the blockhouse. They placed the satchel charges against the wall. Basilone pulled the fuse igniter. They had 30 seconds. Basilone ran. He made it 15 yards before a Japanese mortar round landed directly on his position. The explosion killed him instantly. He was 27 years old. He had been on Iwo Jima for 8 hours. The satchel charges detonated. The blockhouse was destroyed. The artillery fire that had pinned down Basilone's battalion ceased. The Marines advanced. By nightfall, they had secured their D-Day objectives. The advance had cost 500 casualties. Without Basilone's assault on the blockhouse, casualties would have been twice that number. John Basilone was buried in Arlington National Cemetery on April 20, 1945. Full military honors. The Marine Corps had lost its most famous enlisted man, the only Marine in World War II to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. The Navy Cross was awarded posthumously for his actions on Iwo Jima. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism while serving as a leader of a machine gun section. His actions cleared the way for the tanks and infantry to advance." Basilone's widow, Lena, never remarried. She lived until 1999. She was buried beside her husband at Arlington. They had been married for 7 months in 1944. They remained together for 54 years after his death. The Marine Corps named multiple facilities after Basilone: a road at Camp Pendleton, a parade deck at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, an armory in his hometown of Raritan, New Jersey. In 2005, HBO produced a miniseries called The Pacific. One episode focused on Basilone's defense of Henderson Field. Actor John Seda portrayed Basilone. The episode brought his story to millions of viewers who had never heard of Manila John. What Basilone did on November 1, 1942 should have been impossible. 2 machine guns against 2,000 Japanese soldiers, 6 Marines holding 200 yards of frontage, multiple assaults over 4 hours, 200 enemy casualties, 0 penetrations of the defensive line. The mathematics did not support survival. Basilone survived anyway. He survived because he understood something about combat that cannot be taught. When retreat is impossible and reinforcement is unavailable, the only option is to hold. And holding means fighting until the enemy stops coming or you stop breathing. On Guadalcanal, the enemy stopped coming first. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We are rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about Marines who held impossible positions with machine guns and courage. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure John Basilone does not disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make that happen.